Chodź, Niniuszka. Chodź, Niniuszka. Poczekaj, nie. Hello. Welcome. This is week 12 of the Cultural Geography, and I'd like to talk with you today about British legends, folklore, and then a little bit also about the places connected with famous writers. So let's start with the legends. There are many legends in Britain that are related to specific geographical locations. Two of them are definitely the most well-known and basically iconic for British culture, and I mean the legends surrounding the stories of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Chodź, Niuńka, chodź, czemu ty miauczysz? And then, slightly later, the legends surrounding the stories of Robin Hood. Oh, there are two cats. You can see two cats at the same time. That's why they are meowing so much. Chodź, Watson. They are jealous. They are just jealous. So, do we continue or do we stop? Okay, chodź, Watson. Okay, perhaps there will be quiet now. So the first of those huge emblematic British legends is the legend of King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, like Sir Lancelot and the quest for the Holy Grail, Queen Guinevere, and they are getting crazy. I don't know what happened to them. And these are the legends that are still disputed by the scholars and culture historians. Was there ever a real inspiration for King Arthur and his court? Was he a Celtic warrior fighting against the Romans, or perhaps a descendant of the Roman nobility who stayed in Britain fighting against the Anglo-Saxons after the Roman troops withdrew? Or was he just a legend, a mythical savior of the nation who would come when he was most needed? Anyway, the stories connected with King Arthur and his knights are rooted in English geography, especially the south of England, Cornwall, and the areas around Somerset and Devon. So we have, first of all, the king himself. Here we have a late Victorian painting by Edward Burne-Jones, showing, of course, the imagined scene of the death of King Arthur, who was supposed to have lived around the 5th or 6th century, so basically the beginning of the Anglo-Saxon presence in Britain. And the death itself, which is very mysterious if you remember the stories, so sometimes he does not die, he is taken away by the sorceresses to the mythical island of Avalon, where he is sleeping and waiting for his country to need him. But anyway, this is all happening in the south of England. The place connected with the stories of the death of King Arthur, the place believed to be the mythical, supernatural portal to the island of Avalon, is the little town of Glastonbury in Somerset, and especially the old tower that survives, the old medieval tower, early medieval, that survives on a little hill. It's called Glastonbury Tor. Tor being the local variation of the tower. So probably this gave rise to the story of an island on a lake, which was supposed to be the magical land of Avalon. The stories of King Arthur and his battles, his knights, his quests, his loves were inspirational already to the medieval kings. In fact, the old Anglo-Saxon capital city of Winchester, which we discussed a little already, prided itself to have the very original round table that was used by the king and his knights. It is displayed on the wall in Winchester Castle in Hampshire. Of course, we know it has been researched. It is a medieval copy or medieval creation, just pretending to be the very original round table of King Arthur and his knights, but it really shows you that the legends have a very long life, and they were used by already the medieval kings to legitimize their claim to the throne, to legitimize their right of kingship by making some allusions to this great legendary monarch. The place where Arthur and his Queen Guinevere were supposed to be buried was also in Glastonbury, the now ruined abbey in Glastonbury in Somerset. And if you read the plaque that was placed next to the ruins, you will learn that already in the Middle Ages, King Edward I and his wife visited this place, and they were shown what was believed to be the remains of the tomb of King Arthur and Queen Guinevere, including even some skeletons, and the king and queen of the Plantagenet line were so moved by this story that they decided to renovate the abbey, to add a new marble tombstone to this legendary kingly pair. Of course, the abbey and the tomb, the supposed tomb of King Arthur, did not survive the abolition of Christianity and the dissolution of monasteries, but it is one of the places connected with the legend. Another place connected with the Arthurian legend, and rather the way it was inspirational later on, is the castle called Tintagel Castle in Cornwall. You can see a small map here with the places connected with the Arthurian legends, and the ruins of the castle, and the fairly modern but very interesting the sculpture that was added to the area. This is supposed to be one of the castles connected with the Arthurian stories. Hodge Watson. With the Arthurian stories, and what we have is, of course, a medieval castle. There was a lot of scientific exploration made in Tintagel, and they never found anything going further back in history than the Middle Ages. So what we have is some medieval knight being inspired by the stories of King Arthur and his knights, and building castle, or what was supposed to be on the place connected to the legends. So what we have is a very long real history connected to this legendary history, which makes it even more interesting. Of course, there are quite a lot of stories surrounding the main story of Arthur and Guinevere and Lancelot. There is a story made very popular by a poem, a Victorian poem by Lord Tennyson, The Lady of Shalott, an enchanted noblewoman staying in a tower somewhere by the river who sees Sir Lancelot and falls in love with him, and then is cursed by a magical spell and dies. Another story connected with the Arthurian cycle is the story of Tristan and Isolde. So doomed lovers who accidentally drink the love potion and they are cursed with undying love. These are all places and stories connected with the southwest of England. So as you can see, you can find quite a lot of places. This could be an interesting inspiration for your presentation, for your trip design, if you wish. There are some more stories going all the way back to the early Middle Ages, to the Celtic times, to the Anglo-Saxon times. Some of them are connected with concrete geographical locations, such as a legend of the discovery of the medicinal hot springs in the city of Bath by a legendary Celtic king called King Bladud, who was apparently suffering from some sort of skin disease. Some versions have it that it was even leprosy, a very dangerous and deadly disease demonstrating itself by some lesions on the skin. So this king abandoned his court. He lived basically as a homeless man, herding pigs. So this is what he did, royal man herding pigs. And once he noticed his pigs taking particular pleasure and joy by bathing in something that turned out to be medicinal springs. And when the king joined the pigs in the bath, he was cured of his skin disease. So yes, here we have a Victorian image of this legendary scene, and also an old sculpture marking this legend in the city of Bath. We do not know. Perhaps, well, animals have some sort of instinctive knowledge of certain medical issues. So perhaps it was the animals that discovered the springs in Bath. It is definitely before the Romans came. There was a healing temple already. Dedicated to a local deity. So that's a legendary story, the origin story of a very important place of history and culture. There are some stories connected with the beginning of Christianity, with Christian saints, with the founders of monasteries and other religious places of pilgrimage. So there is, of course, quite a lot of real history, like the history of Thomas Becket and Canterbury Abbey. But one of the interesting stories is in Yorkshire, from Whitby Abbey, the wonderful, very large and imposing early medieval ruin during the dissolution of monasteries, famous for a very important historical event, the Synod of Whitby, that decided which version of Christianity Britain would follow, but also connected with a legendary story of Saint Hilda. Saint Hilda, an Anglo-Saxon noblewoman who led a very pious life, and apparently she was the founder of Whitby Abbey, and if you look at the photograph, this is one of the things that you can find in the vicinity that have always puzzled people. We now know these are the ammonites, the fossilized remains of some sea creatures like sea snails and their shells from a very long time ago. And to the people in the Middle Ages, these strange stones looked like snakes, like coiled snakes that were turned magically into the stone. And this was connected with the legend of Saint Hilda, who apparently faced a problem with large numbers of snakes in Whitby, the place where she had her monastery. So she prayed, and the miracle happened. All the snakes were turned to stone. So this is what happens, and this is why we can still find the ammonites, so the remains of the that's fine, of the snakes in the ground. A similar story about a saint driving the snakes away from his land is, of course, the story of Saint Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland. Here we have a modern version with the cartoon, with the saint literally driving the snakes away. Of course, originally he did something similar to Saint Hilda, probably. Then we have some more medieval legends connected with the saints. Here we have the ruined abbey, now ruined abbey of Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk, one of the first Christian places in England after the withdrawal of the Romans, so after the re-Christianization of England, connected to the person of an Anglo-Saxon king, Saint Edmund, king of East Anglia, who converted to Christianity, but then he was killed. He was shot by arrows by the Vikings, and the leader of the Viking party who killed him, we are talking about around in the 9th century, was a Viking king or warlord called Sven Forkbeard. And apparently, of course, this is history, so probably King Edmund accepted Christianity, and he was what? So the story of the martyrdom of King Edmund, the Anglo-Saxon king of East Anglia, who accepted Christianity and was killed by the Vikings, is of course history. This really happened, but the legends and miracles connected with this place and this saint are of course more legendary. One such story has a wolf guarding the beheaded king, the head of King Edmund, who was killed by arrows, then beheaded. Probably his body was left somewhere in the forest, and when his servants came looking for the king, they found the head of the king guarded by a peaceful wolf. So here we have a sculpture showing this moment. Also, there is a story of some sort of miracle performed by Saint Edmund against the man who killed him. So the Viking Lord Svein Forkbeard. Apparently he had a nightmare in which Saint Edmund came to him and, depending on the story, killed him on the spot. So the man basically died in his sleep, or he scared him so much that the Viking repented and perhaps even converted to Christianity himself. So we have those typical medieval stories of the miraculous places, of the saints performing miracles. Then we have some more medieval stories, not really connected with Christian figures, but with local nobility, let's put it this way. So the first one is referring to the events that happened allegedly in the 11th century in West Midlands, in the city of Coventry, and the person who's the main heroine here is called Lady Godiva. You see the 19th century painting by John Collier. You also see the statue of Lady Godiva in Coventry, and the image of her riding a horse naked on the clock tower, also in Coventry. The story was that Lady Godiva was a wife of a local aristocrat, a local landowner. She sympathized with the poor people of the city, and she tried to convince her husband to lower the taxes for the poor people of the city. The husband agreed, but on a condition that his wife, a very modest, pious lady, would ride naked through the streets of Coventry on horseback. She agreed, and according to the legend, she fulfilled this condition. She actually rode the streets of Coventry naked, covered only by her long hair. But the merchants, the people of the city showed her great respect by hiding in their homes, not going out into the streets, so she would have more privacy. She wouldn't be so ashamed. The one exception was a young man called Tom, who was so curious to see this beautiful, noble lady naked that he actually decided to peep through the door. That's why we have the term peeping Tom. But according to the legend, he was punished by being struck with blindness by God, probably. So this is a very localized legend connected with one particular city, and this medieval story. Of course, we do not know whether it ever happened, but maybe it is quite probable. Well, it sounds, it's not supernatural, let's put it this way. Then we move, of course, to the stories of Robin Hood and his merry men. This is all connected with the county of Nottinghamshire. So what we have are all kinds of places. Well, they lived in the forest. They were a band of robbers, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, mainly themselves, but providing some sort of help and relief for the local people. So they are like folk heroes, defending the poor against the rich. There are many versions of this story. You probably are familiar with some film or TV series version telling the story of Robin Hood and his company. But if you ever go to Nottinghamshire, there are all kinds of places connected with this story. You can find even guidebooks like Robin Hood Trail here, detailing how to get to all these places, usually around the city of Nottingham, like Nottingham Castle, where Robin Hood and his companions were often imprisoned by the Sheriff of Nottingham and his men, or around Sherwood Forest, the place connected with Robin Hood and his companions. So again, perhaps an interesting place to research a little bit on your own, and to Google the trails and the places connected with this very resonant English legend from the Middle Ages, from the time of the Crusades, from the time of Richard the Lionheart and his bad brother King John. So this is why King John is such a villain, because he's the villain of the Robin Hood stories. So there we go. There are some more stories from the Middle Ages. There is a story from Wales, from northwestern Wales, the village, the place called Beddgelert, which means Gelert's grave, apparently, and the story, the legend of the dog, a faithful dog called Gelert. So, according to the legend, it happened around the 13th century, and a local nobleman, a local Welsh prince, if there were princes at that time still, but this is what the legend says, had a particularly faithful dog whose name was Gelert, and when the nobleman married and had a baby son, this dog would protect the son with his life. And there was a dangerous occurrence that happened when the master of Gelert was away, and he returned and saw the traces of blood on the floor of the castle where they lived. And of course, the first thing he did was to rush to the room where his baby son was sleeping, and the baby was not there. He was greeted by Gelert, and he believed that for some strange reason the dog must have attacked the baby and killed him. So in his despair and in his rage, he killed the dog on the spot with his sword. Then he noticed that in fact the blood was neither the baby's nor even the dog's. It belonged to a wolf that apparently crept into the castle, tried to attack the baby, but was repelled and killed by the faithful dog Gelert. So the prince repented and was very sorry of killing his best friend, and buried him in this commemorative manner, so that his faithfulness would not be forgotten. Some more stories from slightly later periods, the 15th century, the 17th century, the 18th century. They are also quite localized, and they usually tell tales of local celebrities for whatever reason. So the first one is the legend, the story of Dick Whittington and his cat. This is a 15th century story from London, something that was very popular as a children's story, mostly because it features the cat. It's not a talking cat like the Puss in Boots, but a proper mouse hunting cat that was the closest friend and companion of a poor country boy called Richard, or Dick Whittington, who came from the country to London to look for work with nothing, no possessions of his own except for his faithful cat friend. And the cat was so effective in catching mice and rats that Dick was rewarded, and this is what started his spectacular career, which ended with him becoming the Lord Mayor of London. Here we have an old lithograph showing apparently the historical Richard Whittington with his cat, as you can see. So perhaps there was a grain of truth in the story of the great career of a boy who owned a cat. And here we have our early 20th century poster for a pantomime show showing the dramatized version of Dick Whittington and his cat. Traditionally, this is one of the theatrical traditions connected with the pantomime. The role of a young protagonist, a young boy, would always be played by an attractive young actress. So this is why the boy on the poster looks quite girlish, because he was played by a young woman. So here we have another legend. Two more legends. One from Devon, from a ruined castle of Oakhampton, apparently connected to a local noblewoman, Lady Mary Howard, who apparently was a femme fatale who outlived 4 husbands. So we do not know, perhaps they died of natural reasons. At this time, a woman usually married a man much older than herself, so it was quite likely that she would become a widow at some point. But what we have here is the story of a femme fatale who murdered her 4 husbands and was riding as punishment at night in some sort of haunted carriage. So that's one story. Also connected with the place, connected with some sort of supernatural, spooky history, and the local noblewoman who was painted as a villainess here. The last one here, and then we pass on to the folklore, is a real person again from the 18th century, a highwayman, so a robber who attacked people traveling the roads, called Dick Turpin. He was a kind of romanticized highwayman, a little bit like the modern Robin Hood, although he did not really give anything to the poor. He probably believed he was poor enough himself. So he was a kind of gentleman robber who would stop the carriages and take all the valuables from the rich traveling. He's connected with 2 places in England. One area of his work was in Essex, and then apparently he moved to York. He escaped from the gallows, he escaped from the prisons many times. We do not really know whether it really happened. Apparently there was a man by that name, and in the end he was hanged for his crimes, but his grave in York became something of a historical monument. So here we have it as well. And now in a moment, let's move to the folklore.